Ma'am, can I speak with you a moment? Store staff called us about a concern. I need to verify what you're doing in the boutique.
I'm sorry, I'm just shopping, looking at sweaters.
I understand. I'm going to need to see some identification, please.
For what reason? I'm not doing anything wrong.
If you don't provide ID, you'll need to step outside with me or you'll be detained.
Every year in the United States, law enforcement conducts an estimated 13 million investigative stops of civilians. According to data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, roughly 1 in 8 of those stops results in no citation, no arrest, and no formal documentation of wrongdoing. Just a detention, just questions, just someone going about their day until they weren't. The call comes in as routine. A store manager reports suspicious activity at a boutique clothing store. No theft confirmed, no threats made, just a feeling that something seems off. Officer Isaac Whitmore pulls into the parking lot and activates his Bodycam. It's a Thursday afternoon in suburban Connecticut. The sun is bright, the store is calm, and inside a woman is shopping for sweaters. In less than 10 minutes, she'll be in handcuffs. 2 hours later, she'll be released without charges. 9 months after that, the case will settle for nearly $1 million. This is what happens when shopping becomes suspicious. Tanya Morrison is 32 years old. She works in marketing. On this particular afternoon, she stopped into Willow and Thread Boutique during her lunch break. She's wearing jeans and a cream blouse, carrying a small shopping bag from the bookstore next door. She's looking at sweaters, checking price tags, touching fabric the way you do when you're deciding if something is worth the price. Standard shopping behavior, unremarkable in every way. But someone is watching. A store employee notices Morrison browsing and feels uncomfortable. She can't explain why exactly, just something about the way Morrison is moving through the space. She tells her manager. The manager watches Morrison for a few more minutes, then picks up the phone and calls 911. The dispatcher asks what Morrison is doing. The manager says she's been in the store for about 15 minutes, touching merchandise, moving between sections. The dispatcher asks if she's stolen anything. No. Threatened anyone? No. Damaged property? No. The manager just wants an officer to check it out. Officer Whitmore enters the store and approaches Morrison directly. He identifies himself and asks for identification. Morrison is confused. She asks what she did wrong. Whitmore explains that store employees called about suspicious behavior. Morrison looks around, genuinely bewildered. She's been shopping, she says, just looking at sweaters, nothing more. Whitmore repeats that he needs to see identification. This is where the conversation takes a turn. Morrison asks a reasonable question. What specifically was suspicious about her behavior? What law has she broken that requires her to show ID? Whitmore explains that the store called, that he's conducting an investigation, and that refusing to cooperate could result in detention. Morrison isn't hostile. She's not aggressive. Her voice is steady, but her confusion is mounting. She repeats that she's done nothing wrong and wants to know why she's being questioned for simply shopping. The interaction escalates quickly. Whitmore tells Morrison to turn around and place her hands behind her back. She's being detained for failure to comply with a lawful investigation. Morrison's breath catches. Her eyes widen. For a moment, she doesn't move, as if her body is trying to process information her mind can't accept. She starts crying, not sobbing, but the kind of tears that come from disbelief and powerlessness. She asks again what specific crime she's accused of. Her voice cracks slightly on the word crime. Whitmore steps behind her. The Bodycam captures the moment in full clarity. Morrison's shoulders tense as she feels his presence close. She turns slowly, hands trembling as she brings them behind her back. The handcuffs click into place with a sharp metallic sound that echoes slightly in the quiet store. The ambient music, something soft and acoustic, continues playing overhead, absurdly cheerful against the scene unfolding. Other customers have stopped moving entirely. One woman near the entrance stands frozen, shopping bag in hand, mouth slightly open. Another customer pulls out her phone and starts recording. Morrison keeps repeating the same phrase as she's escorted toward the exit, her voice barely above a whisper now. I was just shopping. I was just shopping. The automatic doors slide open. Sunlight floods in. And then she's outside. being guided toward a patrol car in a parking lot where other shoppers are loading purchases into their trunks, completely unaware. She's taken to the police station, processed, and held for 2 hours in a small holding cell with pale green walls and fluorescent lighting that hums constantly. No charges are filed, no evidence of theft is found, no criminal behavior is documented. She sits on a metal bench, hands still shaking, replaying the encounter over and over, trying to identify the exact moment where everything went wrong. She can't find it. She's released with a standard form stating she was detained for investigative purposes. The marks from the handcuffs are still visible on her wrists when she drives home. Most stories like this end here. The person goes home, feels humiliated, maybe tells a few friends, and moves on. But Morrison doesn't move on. 3 days later, she contacts civil rights attorney Marcus Delgado and asks a simple question: what law did I break? Delgado requests all available footage: Bodycam from Officer Whitmore, surveillance cameras from the store, the 111 call, incident reports. When the footage arrives, he watches it carefully. Then he watches the store surveillance, which captured Morrison from the moment she entered. The timeline is straightforward. Morrison walks into the store, goes directly to the sweater section, picks up a few items, checks price tags, puts them back. She examines stitching on one sweater. She holds a cardigan up briefly, checking the color in different light. At no point does she conceal merchandise, remove security tags, glance nervously towards exits, or exhibit any behavior consistent with shoplifting. She's shopping exactly the way anyone shops. Yet 4 minutes after she enters, a store employee alerts the manager. 2 minutes later, the manager calls police. 2 minutes after that, Officer Whitmore arrives. The 911 call is particularly revealing. The manager can't articulate what Morrison is doing wrong, she's just uncomfortable. Morrison has been in the store for several minutes, touching things, moving around. When pressed, the manager admits Morrison hasn't stolen anything, hasn't threatened anyone, hasn't damaged anything. She just has a feeling something is off. Think about that for a moment. How many times have you browsed a store, touched multiple items, moved between sections, spent 10 or 15 minutes deciding on a purchase? At what point does normal shopping behavior become suspicious? And who gets to decide? Delgado digs deeper. He subpoenas records from Willow and Thread covering the past 18 months. The store called police on shoppers 11 times during that period. 8 of those calls involved customers of color. 7 resulted in no arrests or citations. Not a single call resulted in a confirmed theft or conviction. The pattern is stark, and it's documented. He also requests employee training records. The store provided extensive training on product knowledge, sales techniques, and inventory management, but training on bias recognition, reasonable suspicion, or appropriate use of law enforcement? 0 hours. The only loss prevention training was a 17-minute video from 2014 that told employees to trust their gut. No legal standards explained, no guidance on when to call police versus when to engage customers as, well, customers. Delgado files a federal lawsuit alleging violation of Fourth Amendment rights. The legal principle here is critical to understand. In the United States, police encounters fall into 3 categories. First, there are voluntary encounters, where officers can approach and ask questions, but you're free to walk away. Second, there are investigatory detentions, sometimes called Terry stops, where police can briefly detain you if they have reasonable, articulable suspicion that criminal activity is occurring. Third, there are arrests, which require probable cause that a crime has been committed. The key threshold is reasonable suspicion. It's a specific legal standard. Officers must be able to point to concrete facts, not hunches, not feelings, not vague discomfort. They need articulable reasons based on training and experience that would lead a reasonable person to believe criminal activity is afoot. Wandering in a store isn't reasonable suspicion. Touching merchandise isn't reasonable suspicion. Taking time to browse isn't reasonable suspicion. These are normal behaviors in retail spaces.
Morrison's case hinges on this distinction. When Whitmore approached her, was it a voluntary encounter or a detention? The moment he demanded identification and threatened arrest for non-compliance, it became a detention. But did he have the reasonable suspicion required to legally justify that detention? Delgado argues no. The store's call doesn't create reasonable suspicion where none exists. A manager's vague discomfort, unsupported by any specific observable criminal behavior, doesn't meet the constitutional standard. 9 months later, all parties agree to mediation. It takes place in a downtown conference room with large windows overlooking the city. The room is deliberately neutral, designed to facilitate resolution. Tanya Morrison sits at one end of a long table, Delgado beside her. Across from them sit representatives from the police department, the city attorney, and the boutique's corporate counsel. The store owner is present as well, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggests this is not how he imagined his business being discussed. It's a 2-day process. Delgado presents his evidence methodically. Bodycam footage plays on a large monitor. The room watches in silence. Then store surveillance. The side-by-side comparison is damning. Statistical analysis showing the pattern of disproportionate police calls. Expert testimony from a former police chief who reviews the footage and concludes, in measured professional language, that Whitmore's detention of Morrison lacked the reasonable suspicion required by law. Expert testimony from a retail loss prevention specialist who states plainly that Morrison exhibited 0 behaviors consistent with theft attempts. Then Morrison testifies. Her voice is quiet but steady. She describes the humiliation of being handcuffed in public for no reason, the fear of sitting in a holding cell wondering if her life was about to change forever over nothing, the anxiety that lingers every time she enters a store now, any store. She can't buy groceries without becoming hyper-aware of her pace, her path through aisles, how many items she touches. Shopping, something mundane and forgettable, has become loaded with tension and self-consciousness. The room is silent when she finishes. The mediator, a retired federal judge with 30 years on the bench, removes his glasses and speaks directly to the defense representatives. The evidence is clear, he says. The pattern is documented. The emotional harm is real, and juries, particularly in civil rights cases involving clear documentation, are unpredictable. If this proceeds to trial, you're looking at a verdict that could substantially exceed anything discussed here today.
The defendants confer privately. The police chief's jaw is tight. The boutique owner stares at the table. 2 hours later, they return with an offer. The settlement totals $950,000, $600,000 from the boutique, $350,000 from the police department and city. Morrison receives the full amount minus attorney fees. But the settlement includes more than money. Willow and Thread agrees to mandatory quarterly anti-bias training for all employees, revised loss prevention protocols requiring employees to document specific articulable behaviors before any police contact, additional surveillance cameras with mandatory management review before any 911 calls, third-party audits every 6 months examining customer interaction data for demographic disparities. The police department agrees to enhance training on Fourth Amendment standards in retail contexts, revised protocols requiring officers to independently assess situations before detention, and monthly reviews of retail-related calls to identify potential patterns. Morrison releases a statement through Delgado's office. This was never about money, she says. It was about dignity, about the right to exist in public spaces without being presumed criminal. She hopes the policy changes prevent anyone else from experiencing what she did. And she hopes this case reminds people that documentation matters, accountability matters, and constitutional rights matter even in ordinary moments. Officer Whitmore remains on the force. He completes the enhanced training and returns to regular duty. The store manager who made the 911 call no longer works at Willow and Thread. The circumstances of her departure aren't publicly disclosed. The boutique stays open, and Tanya Morrison goes back to her life, carrying something she didn't have before: a wariness, a knowledge that ordinary moments can turn dangerous without warning.
Here's why this case matters beyond the settlement amount. The body cam footage eliminates ambiguity. There's no disputed timeline, no conflicting accounts, no question about Morrison's behavior. The footage shows exactly what happened. A woman shopping normally was treated as suspicious for reasons never articulated, never justified by observable facts, and never supported by legal standards.
Cases like this happen more often than most people realize. In Ohio, a man was detained in Target for shopping too long for a vacuum cleaner. In California, a woman was questioned in Nordstrom for spending too much time looking at handbags. In New York, a teenager was stopped in a convenience store for loitering while deciding which chips to buy. In Florida, a man was followed through a home improvement store by security for 40 minutes before being questioned at the exit, his cart full of lumber he was prepared to purchase. These incidents rarely make national news. Most don't result in lawsuits. Most don't have clear documentation. Most end with the person leaving, shaken, humiliated, and without recourse. Morrison's case stands out because she had resources, a good attorney, clear documentation, the emotional resilience to pursue justice through a long legal process. Most people don't have all three. For every case that results in accountability and policy change, there are countless others that never get resolved, never get acknowledged, never result in any systemic change. The takeaway isn't that all store employees are biased or all officers are bad. The systems themselves are the issue. Systems without accountability, without clear standards, without proper training will default to the biases and assumptions of the people operating them. Training matters. Clear legal standards matter. Documentation matters. Transparency matters. And constitutional rights matter, especially when they're tested in ordinary moments like buying a sweater on a Thursday afternoon. Tanya Morrison didn't ask to become a case study in civil rights law. She didn't seek out confrontation or controversy. She just wanted to shop. That should have been the entire story. But somewhere between browsing and checkout, someone decided she didn't belong. And that decision, that feeling, that vague discomfort with no basis in observable behavior cost nearly $1 million to rectify. The body cam footage remains in court records indefinitely. The settlement will be cited in future cases. The policy changes will hopefully prevent some future incidents. But none of that erases those 8 minutes where a woman asked what she did wrong and never got an answer. Because there wasn't one. If this story made you think, drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more investigations into cases where footage reveals uncomfortable truths, hit subscribe. These stories deserve attention. And the next time you're in a store, browsing, taking your time, touching merchandise you might not buy, remember Tanya Morrison. Remember that for some people, that simple act carries weight you may never have to consider.